Hey guys, tonight we're going to take you on a journey to one of the most beautiful and absolutely terrifying tourist destinations in our solar system. Picture this. It's the year 2070 and you've just booked what marketing companies are calling the ultimate luxury space experience, a 2-week vacation to Venus. But here's something they don't mention in those glossy brochures floating around your neural feed. Venus doesn't want you there. And by the end of your very expensive trip, you'll understand exactly why this planet has spent 4.5 billion years perfecting the art of being utterly hostile to human life. Before we begin this cosmic nightmare disguised as a vacation, take a moment to hit that like button if you're ready for tonight's journey, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. I love seeing our global community of dreamers and space enthusiasts gathering here each night. Now, let's begin your Venusian adventure, shall we? The year is 2070, and you're standing in the gleaming departure lounge of Lunar Gateway Station, humanity's premier spaceport orbiting the Moon. Through the massive observation windows, Earth hangs like a blue marble against the star-studded velvet of space, and for just a moment, you feel a pang of homesickness for that distant world. But excitement quickly overtakes any reservations as you clutch your boarding pass, a thin, translucent card that simply reads, Venus Express, Floating Paradise Experience. You've saved for 3 years for this moment. The cost of your 2-week Venus tourism package could have bought you a small house on Mars or a year-long cruise through the asteroid belt, but Venus was different. Venus was exclusive. Venus was dangerous. And that danger, marketed as adventure, was exactly what drew you and a select few hundred others to sign up for this inaugural season of Venusian tourism. The other passengers in the lounge are an eclectic mix. There's Margaret Chen, a retired terraforming engineer from Europa who's celebrating her 150th birthday with this trip. Next to her sits Klaus Weber, a young entrepreneur from the German colonies on Titan who made his fortune in atmospheric processes. In the corner, you notice the Yamamoto family, parents and their twin teenagers who won this trip in a lottery sponsored by the Venusian Tourism Consortium. As you study these fellow travelers, each wearing the confident smile of someone who believes they're about to experience the adventure of a lifetime, you can't help but wonder if any of them truly understand what they've signed up for. The promotional materials were admittedly quite compelling. Floating cities in the clouds, breathtaking views of the planet's surface, extreme weather experiences unlike anything else in the solar system. What they didn't emphasize quite as much were the words buried deep in the legal disclaimers. Participants acknowledge significant risk to life and limb. But more on that later. First, there's the journey itself to consider. The Venus Express is a marvel of 2070s engineering, a sleek, kilometre-long vessel designed specifically for the 8-month journey to Venus and back. Its rotating habitat rings create artificial gravity, its fusion engines can maintain a steady acceleration for weeks, and its advanced shielding can protect passengers from most cosmic radiation, most being the operative phrase there. As you board the ship and find your cabin, a modest but comfortable space about the size of a small apartment, you're struck by how normal everything feels. The carpeting is plush, the lighting warm and adjustable, and your personal steward, an AI called Marcus, greets you with the kind of enthusiasm that makes you momentarily forget you're about to spend 4 months in a metal tube hurtling through the vacuum of space. "Welcome aboard, traveller," Marcus says, his holographic form materializing beside your bed with a warm smile. "I'll be your personal assistant throughout the journey. Is there anything I can help you with as we prepare for departure?" You settle into your cabin and feel the gentle vibration as the Express begins its departure from Lunar Gateway. Through your porthole, you watch the moon slowly shrink away, and then Earth becomes just another bright star in the field of view. This is it. You're truly leaving the Earth-Moon system behind, heading into the deeper solar system toward a world that has never, in its entire 4 billion year history, been anything other than completely hostile to life. The first few weeks of the journey are actually quite pleasant. The ship's designers have gone to great lengths to make the experience comfortable. There are restaurants, entertainment venues, observation decks, and even a small garden where actual plants grow in real soil, a luxury that costs more per gram than gold back on Earth. You make friends with other passengers, attend lectures about Venus's geology and atmosphere, and begin to feel like this might actually be the adventure of a lifetime. But as the weeks pass and Venus begins to grow from a bright point of light to an actual disk in the forward viewports, you start to notice subtle changes in the ship's atmosphere. The crew, while still professional and friendly, seem more tense. The daily briefings from the captain begin to include more warnings and safety reminders, and the medical staff start conducting increasingly frequent health checks on all passengers. It's during your third medical examination that Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, the ship's chief medical officer, mentions something that makes you pause. "Your bone density looks good," she says, reviewing the scanner results. That's important where we're going. The atmosphere at the floating cities is kept at about 1/3 Earth pressure, which means your body is going to experience some interesting adaptations. Interesting how, you ask? Dr. Rodriguez pauses, choosing her words carefully. Well, the reduced pressure means your blood will need to carry oxygen differently. Some passengers experience a condition we call venous hypoxia. Not dangerous, but it can cause persistent fatigue, mild confusion, and a constant feeling that you're not getting quite enough air. It usually passes after a few days, but she trails off. But what? But some people find the sensation quite unpleasant. Last year's test groups reported feeling like they were slowly suffocating for their entire stay. This is the first hint you get that maybe, just maybe, this vacation isn't going to be quite as relaxing as advertised, but it's far from the last. 4 months later, you get your first real look at Venus through the Express's observation deck, and the sight takes your breath away, though not necessarily in a good way. Venus hangs before you like a malevolent pearl, its thick atmosphere swirling with sulfuric acid clouds that reflect the sun's light with an intensity that makes the viewing screens automatically dim to protect your retinas. Even through the ship's advanced filters, the planet radiates a sense of raw, untamed power that makes Earth seem positively gentle by comparison. "Beautiful, isn't it?" says Klaus, the entrepreneur from Titan, as he joins you at the observation deck. But there's something in his voice, a slight tremor that suggests he's trying to convince himself as much as you. The planet below is indeed beautiful, in the way that a massive hurricane or an active volcano is beautiful, from a very, very safe distance. The cloud layers swirl in mesmerizing patterns, creating spirals and eddies that span thousands of kilometers. Lightning flickers constantly in the depths of those clouds, creating a perpetual light show that would be spectacular if it weren't so ominous. Captain Maria Santos's voice comes over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now entering Venus's gravity well. Please secure all personal items and prepare for atmospheric entry." Our destination is New Olympia, the largest of the floating cities, currently positioned at an altitude of 52 kilometers above the planet's surface. 52 kilometers. You try to put that in perspective. On Earth, that would put you well into the stratosphere, in what's essentially the vacuum of space. But Venus's atmosphere is so incredibly thick that at 52 kilometers altitude, there's still enough air pressure to keep a floating city aloft. Air that happens to be composed primarily of carbon dioxide with a delightful mix of sulfuric acid vapor. The descent through Venus's upper atmosphere is unlike anything you've ever experienced. The ship begins to vibrate as it encounters the first wisps of the planet's outer atmospheric layers, and through the viewports you can see the hull beginning to glow with the heat of entry. The temperature outside is climbing rapidly, -20 Celsius at the uppermost reaches, but rising fast as you descend. Current external temperature is 150 Celsius, announces the ship's computer in its maddeningly calm voice. External pressure is 10 times Earth normal and climbing. 150 Celsius. That's hot enough to melt lead. And you're still in the relatively cool upper atmosphere. Margaret Chen, the retired terraforming engineer, settles into the seat beside you as the ship continues its controlled descent. I helped design some of the atmospheric processes that make this possible, she says, gesturing toward the windows, but I never imagined I'd actually experience it firsthand. What's it like down there, you ask? On the surface, I mean. Margaret's expression grows serious. The surface of Venus is a place that would kill you in about 6 different ways simultaneously. The atmospheric pressure is 92 times what you're used to on Earth, equivalent to being underwater at a depth of nearly 1 kilometre. The temperature is 462 Celsius, hot enough to melt zinc. The air is pure carbon dioxide with sulfuric acid clouds, and it rains sulfuric acid constantly, though the rain never reaches the ground because it evaporates in the heat long before it gets there. She pauses, looking out at the churning clouds below. In all my years of terraforming work, I've never encountered an environment more fundamentally hostile to life. Mars is practically a garden paradise compared to Venus. This is when you begin to realize that the marketing materials for your floating paradise experience may have been somewhat optimistic. The ship's descent continues for what feels like hours. Outside, the sky grows darker and more turbulent as you sink deeper into Venus's thick atmosphere. Lightning becomes more frequent and more intense, massive bolts that stretch across the sky like cracks in reality itself. The temperature continues to climb 200 Celsius, 300, 400. We're now passing through the main sulfuric acid cloud deck, Captain Santos announces. Passengers should be aware that external visibility will be essentially zero for the next several hours. And indeed, the world outside your viewport simply vanishes into a corrosive, roiling fog. The ship's hull cameras show nothing but swirling, yellowish-grey clouds that stretch in every direction. It's like being inside a massive storm that covers an entire planet, which, you realize, is exactly what you are experiencing. The young Yamamoto twins, Hiroshi and Keiko, press their faces to the viewport beside you, their excitement palpable despite the increasingly ominous conditions outside. "Are we really going to live up there in the clouds?" Hiroshi asks his parents in heavily accented English. Their father, Takeshi, nods with the kind of determined optimism that parents master when trying to convince their children that everything is going to be fine. "The floating cities are perfectly safe," he says. "They've been tested for over 2 years." 2 years. In geological terms, that's not even a blink of an eye. Venus has been perfecting its hostility for billions of years, and humanity thinks 2 years of testing is sufficient preparation. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of descent through acid clouds and crushing atmosphere, the ship begins to level off. Through the external cameras, you catch your first glimpse of New Olympia, and you have to admit it's an impressive sight. The floating city stretches across the sky like something from a science fiction dream. Massive transparent domes rise from a network of interconnected platforms, their surfaces gleaming despite the corrosive atmosphere around them. Smaller structures hang beneath the main platform like technological stalactites, and the entire complex is held aloft by enormous balloons filled with heated air and helium. New Olympia currently houses approximately 5,000 permanent residents. The tour guide's voice crackles through the intercom as your ship approaches the city's docking bay. The city maintains an internal temperature of 22 Celsius and atmospheric pressure of 0.35 bars, about 1/3 of Earth normal. The city is completely self-sufficient, with its own water recycling, atmospheric processing, and food production facilities. As impressive as it looks, you can't help but notice how small and fragile New Olympia appears against the vast, churning atmosphere that surrounds it. It's like a small boat on an ocean of acid clouds, constantly at the mercy of atmospheric currents that could easily destroy it if they chose to. The docking procedure takes nearly an hour, during which you watch through the viewport as robotic arms carefully guide the Express into a sealed docking tube. The city's docking bay is a marvel of engineering, completely enclosed and pressurized to protect both the ships and their passengers from the corrosive atmosphere outside. "Welcome to New Olympia," Captain Santos announces as the ship settles into its berth. External atmospheric pressure is currently 91.7 times Earth normal. External temperature is 458 Celsius. Please remember that these conditions are immediately fatal to human life, so adherence to all safety protocols is not just recommended but essential for survival. And with those cheerful words ringing in your ears, you prepare to disembark and begin your 2-week vacation in what is arguably the most hostile environment that humans have ever attempted to create a tourist destination in. But the real surprises are still to come. Your first breath of New Olympia's air is strange. The oxygen content is correct, 21%, just like Earth, but the pressure difference is immediately noticeable. It's like breathing at high altitude, except you're not on a mountain. You're floating in a city suspended 52 kilometers above the surface of hell. The disembarkation process is more complex than you expected. Before you're allowed to leave the ship, every passenger must undergo a final medical check and receive what the staff cheerfully refers to as atmospheric adaptation medication, a cocktail of drugs designed to help your body adjust to the reduced pressure and the constant trace amounts of sulfuric acid vapor that inevitably seep into even the best sealed environments. The medication will help prevent altitude sickness and reduce the effects of acid exposure, explains Dr. Rodriguez as she administers your injection. You may experience some mild nausea, dizziness, and a metallic taste in your mouth for the first few days. This is completely normal. Completely normal. You're beginning to realize that phrase gets used a lot when describing decidedly abnormal situations. The Yamamoto family is struggling with the adjustment. Little Keiko is already complaining of feeling dizzy, and her brother Hiroshi has developed a persistent cough that the medical staff assures everyone is typical for newcomers. Their parents exchange worried glances but maintain brave faces for their children. Klaus Weber seems to be handling the transition better than most, though you notice he's taken to carrying a small oxygen supplement device, a clear plastic mask connected to a portable tank. Titanite atmospheric conditioning, he explains when he catches you looking. We're used to low-pressure environments in the outer system. Margaret Chen appears completely unaffected by the atmospheric changes, which makes sense given her background in terraforming. If anyone was prepared for the challenge of living in an artificially maintained atmosphere floating in a sea of acid clouds, it would be her. Once you've passed the medical screening, you're finally allowed to enter New Olympia proper, and you have to admit, the first impression is remarkable. The city's main plaza is enclosed in a massive transparent dome that offers a panoramic view of the Venusian cloudscape stretching away in all directions. The floors are polished metal grating through which you can see more clouds far below, and the architecture has a distinctly utilitarian yet elegant feel that screams expensive engineering. Your hotel, the Cloud9 Resort, is a gleaming tower near the city's center with rooms that offer what the brochures promised would be unparalleled views of Venus's atmospheric phenomena. Your suite is actually quite luxurious, spacious, well-appointed, and featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that look out into the swirling acid clouds. But luxury has a different meaning when you're floating in a corrosive atmosphere 50 kilometers above a molten hellscape. The first thing you notice is the constant, subtle vibration. New Olympia is never completely still. The city sways gently in the atmospheric currents and occasionally shudders when hit by particularly strong wind shears. It's not uncomfortable exactly, but it's a constant reminder that you're not on solid ground. You're in an artificial structure held aloft by technology in an environment that would dissolve you if that technology failed. The second thing you notice is the sound. Even inside the sealed and pressurized city, you can hear Venus. It's a constant, low-level rumble. Partly the sound of wind rushing past the city's exterior, partly the sound of the atmospheric processes working constantly to maintain breathable air, and partly something else. Something deeper and more unsettling that seems to come from the planet itself. That's the sound of lightning, your hotel concierge, a cheerful woman named Lisa, explains when you ask about the rumbling. Venus experiences more lightning activity than any other planet in the solar system. What you're hearing is constant electrical activity in the cloud layers below us. There are typically several hundred lightning strikes per second occurring within a few kilometers of the city at any given time. Several hundred lightning strikes per second. The numbers associated with Venus tourism keep getting more alarming. Your first meal in the city is served in the Cloud Nine's restaurant, which features the promised panoramic views of the Venusian atmosphere. As you sit down with your fellow passengers, you're treated to the sight of what the menu describes as Venus's natural atmospheric light show. Outside the restaurant's windows, the cloud deck stretches away in all directions like a vast rolling sea. But this sea is composed of sulfuric acid vapor, and it's constantly illuminated from within by lightning. Flashes of electric blue, brilliant white, and occasionally even green or purple flicker through the clouds like camera flashes at a cosmic concert. It's simultaneously beautiful and deeply unsettling. The food itself is actually quite good, though you can't help but notice that everything has a slightly metallic aftertaste that Dr. Rodriguez warned you about. The restaurant staff explains that all water in the city must be constantly filtered to remove trace amounts of sulfuric acid, and all food is grown in hydroponic gardens using carefully controlled atmospheric conditions. We import some specialty items from Earth and Mars. Your waiter, a young man named David who's been working on New Olympia for 6 months, tells you. But most of our food is grown right here in the city. It's actually fresher than most Earth food by the time it reaches the outer colonies. You ask David how he likes living on Venus, and his smile becomes just a little forced. It's an amazing experience, he says, very unique, though I have to admit I'm looking forward to my rotation ending next month. You don't enjoy it here? David glances around to make sure his supervisor isn't listening, then leans in closer. Between you and me, it gets to you after a while. The constant storms, the knowledge that you're floating above, he gestures downward. Well, you know what's down there, and the acid exposure. Acid exposure? Oh, it's perfectly safe according to all the medical reports, David says quickly, but everyone who works here long-term develops what we call Venus skin. The constant trace exposure to sulfuric acid vapor causes skin irritation, hair changes, and sometimes respiratory issues. Nothing serious, but he touches his own face, and you notice for the first time that his skin has a slightly reddened, weathered appearance despite his young age. This is your first real indication that there might be long-term health effects that the tourism brochures didn't mention. After dinner, you decide to explore the city a bit more. New Olympia is actually quite impressive from an engineering standpoint. The main level houses residential and commercial areas, while the upper levels contain the atmospheric processing equipment, weather monitoring stations, and the massive balloons that keep the entire city afloat. The lower levels, which you can access via transparent elevators, house the industrial facilities and provide stunning views of the cloud deck below. It's in one of these lower observation areas that you meet Dr. James Harrison, an atmospheric physicist who's been studying Venus's weather patterns from New Olympia for the past 18 months. Fascinating place to work, he tells you as you both watch lightning flicker through the clouds below. Venus has weather patterns unlike anywhere else in the solar system. The entire atmosphere rotates around the planet in just 4 Earth days. That's 60 times faster than the planet's rotation. We're essentially floating in a massive atmospheric river that circles the globe. Is it dangerous, you ask? Dr. Harrison considers the question carefully. Well, we're floating in clouds of sulfuric acid 50 kilometers above a surface hot enough to melt lead, in an atmosphere so thick it would crush you like an empty soda can, while being constantly bombarded by lightning and buffeted by winds that can reach 300 kilometers per hour. He pauses. So yes, I'd say there's an element of danger involved. But the city is safe, right? As safe as human engineering can make it, Dr. Harrison says. But Venus doesn't care about human engineering. This planet has been actively trying to kill anything that might want to live here for 4 billion years, and it's gotten very good at it. As if to emphasize his point, the city suddenly shudders as a particularly strong wind shear hits the flotation balloons. The lights flicker momentarily, and you hear the hum of the stabilization systems working to keep the city level. Wind shear, Dr. Harrison explains casually, happens several times a day. Usually it's just a minor inconvenience, but last month we hit a really severe one that knocked out power to half the city for 6 hours. What happens if the power goes out completely? Dr. Harrison's expression grows serious. The atmospheric processes stop working. Without them, the air inside the city would gradually become unbreathable as carbon dioxide seeps in from outside. We've got backup power systems, of course, but they're only rated for 72 hours of continuous operation. 72 hours. 3 days between you and suffocation if the main power systems fail. You're beginning to understand why Dr. Rodriguez's medical disclaimers were so extensive. As you make your way back to your hotel room that first night, you can't help but notice other small details that the promotional materials didn't emphasize. The constant background hum of atmospheric processes. The slight chemical smell that never quite goes away, no matter how good the air filtration systems are. The way every exterior window is slightly scored and pitted from acid exposure, despite being made of the most advanced corrosion-resistant materials available. And then there are the evacuation route maps posted every few meters throughout the city, with instructions for reaching the emergency shelters in case of atmospheric breach, structural failure, or catastrophic weather event. You fall asleep that first night to the sound of Venus rumbling below you, and you dream of floating in an endless sea of acid clouds while lightning flickers all around you. In your dream, you're trying to find your way back to Earth, but every direction you look, there's nothing but more clouds, more lightning, more of Venus's inexorable hostility. When you wake up, you realize the rumbling wasn't part of the dream. Venus really is growling beneath you all the time, like a vast predator that's temporarily tolerating your presence, but could decide to end that tolerance at any moment. And you still have 13 days left on your vacation. You wake up on your second morning in New Olympia with a persistent headache and the distinct feeling that something is wrong. The metallic taste in your mouth has gotten stronger overnight, and when you look in the bathroom mirror, you notice that your skin looks slightly flushed, as if you'd spent too much time in the sun. These are, according to the informational materials left in your room, completely normal reactions to atmospheric adaptation. The pamphlet cheerfully explains that most tourists experience mild symptoms for the first few days as their bodies adjust to the reduced atmospheric pressure and trace chemical exposure. Trace chemical exposure. That's a euphemistic way of saying you're breathing tiny amounts of sulfuric acid vapor with every breath. Breakfast in the hotel restaurant provides your first opportunity to compare notes with the other tourists, and what you discover isn't particularly reassuring. The Yamamoto twins are both running low-grade fevers and complaining of feeling tired despite sleeping for 10 hours. Margaret Chen seems unaffected, but Klaus Weber has developed a persistent cough that he's treating with increasingly frequent doses from his portable oxygen supply. "How are you feeling this morning?" you ask Klaus as he takes another pull from his oxygen mask. "Like I'm slowly suffocating," he says with a laugh that quickly turns into another coughing fit. "My doctor back on Titan warned me that the atmospheric pressure here might be challenging, but I didn't expect it to feel quite so oppressive." The restaurant's windows offer the same spectacular view of Venus's cloud layers that impressed you yesterday, but this morning you notice details that you missed before. The clouds aren't just randomly swirling, there are patterns in the movement, massive atmospheric currents that stretch across the entire visible horizon. And the lightning isn't just pretty electrical displays, it's constant, violent, and getting closer to the city. "We're moving into a more active weather zone," explains Dr. Harrison when he stops by your table to check on the tourists. "Venus experiences seasonal weather patterns, and we're entering what we call storm season. Nothing to worry about. The city is designed to handle much worse than anything we're likely to encounter, but the lightning activity will increase significantly over the next few days. Storm season. Another detail that the marketing materials somehow failed to mention prominently. After breakfast, you join a guided tour of the city's atmospheric processing facilities led by Chief Engineer Sarah Martinez. The tour is supposed to be reassuring, a chance for tourists to see firsthand how the city maintains its safe, habitable environment despite being surrounded by conditions that would kill them in seconds. New Olympia processes over 2 million cubic meters of Venusian atmosphere every hour, Engineer Martinez explains as she leads your group through a series of gleaming, humming chambers. We extract breathable oxygen, filter out sulfuric acid, and maintain proper pressure and temperature throughout the city. The atmospheric processing center is undeniably impressive. Massive machines work constantly to scrub acid vapor from the air, while enormous pumps maintain the pressure differential that keeps the city's atmosphere from being crushed by the denser Venusian air outside. Everything is redundant, everything is monitored, everything is designed to keep you alive in an environment that wants you dead. But as impressive as it is, you can't help but notice the wear patterns on the equipment. The constant exposure to trace amounts of sulfuric acid is slowly eating away at even the most advanced materials. Seals need to be replaced weekly, filters require daily maintenance, and some of the older equipment shows clear signs of corrosion despite being made from the most acid-resistant alloys available. How often does equipment fail? Asks Margaret Chen, her terraforming experience clearly giving her insight into the challenges involved. Engineer Martinez's smile becomes slightly strained. We have multiple redundant systems for every critical function, she says. Equipment failure is rare, and when it does occur, it's quickly addressed by our maintenance staff. That's not actually an answer to the question, you notice. The tour continues to the city's lower levels, where you can observe the weather monitoring stations and see the massive balloons that keep New Olympia aloft. It's here that you get your most dramatic view yet of the Venusian environment below. Through the transparent floor panels, you can see clouds stretching away in every direction, lit from within by constant lightning. But these aren't the fluffy white clouds you're used to from Earth. These are dense, roiling masses of sulfuric acid vapor, colored in shades of yellow, orange, and brown by various chemical compounds suspended in the atmosphere. And occasionally, through brief gaps in the cloud cover, you catch glimpses of something even more unsettling, the faint, hellish glow of Venus's surface far below, radiating heat like the open door of a cosmic furnace. The surface temperature down there is currently 461 Celsius, Dr. Harrison mentions casually as your group stares down through the clouds. That's hot enough to melt most metals. The atmospheric pressure is 92 times what you're used to on Earth, and the air is pure carbon dioxide with sulfuric acid clouds. Little Keiko Yamamoto, who's been growing increasingly pale during the tour, suddenly grabs her mother's hand. "Mama," she whispers in Japanese, "I want to go home." Her mother tries to comfort her, but you can see the worry in her own eyes. The family clearly didn't expect the psychological impact of being suspended above such a hostile environment. The tour concludes with a visit to the Emergency Systems Center, where Engineer Martinez shows you the city's evacuation procedures and backup life support systems. This is when you learn some details about Venus tourism that definitely weren't in the brochures. In the event of a catastrophic system failure, Martinez explains, all residents and tourists would be evacuated to hardened emergency shelters located in the lower levels of the city. These shelters are designed to maintain life support for up to 1 week while awaiting rescue. 1 week. If something goes seriously wrong, you could be trapped in an emergency shelter for up to a week, floating in Venus's atmosphere with no way to escape. Has that ever been necessary? Asks Klaus Weber. Not since the city became operational for tourism, Martinez says carefully. But during the construction phase, there were several incidents that required temporary evacuation to the emergency shelters. Several incidents. Another euphemism that probably covers some genuinely terrifying experiences. The tour ends with what's supposed to be a highlight, a visit to one of the city's external observation platforms, where you can experience being outside in Venus's atmosphere while still being protected by the city's force field technology. The observation platform is a transparent bubble that extends beyond the city's main structure, giving you a 360-degree view of the Venusian cloudscape. The experience is simultaneously breathtaking and deeply unsettling. You're literally surrounded by an environment that would kill you instantly if the force field failed, and the knowledge that only a thin energy barrier stands between you and death by acid vapor and crushing pressure is not particularly comforting. The force field technology is completely reliable, the platform operator assures you as she notices your nervous expression. We've had 0 failures in over 18 months of operation. 18 months? That's not actually a very long track record for technology that's keeping you alive. As you stand in the observation bubble, watching lightning flicker through the acid clouds all around you, you begin to understand why the Venusian Tourism Consortium had to work so hard to find customers for this experience. The view is undeniably spectacular, but the constant awareness of mortal danger makes it impossible to truly relax and enjoy it. The wind outside the force field is strong enough to make the bubble vibrate slightly, and you can actually hear it, a constant rushing sound that reminds you that you're floating in an alien atmosphere where the very air is poison and the weather patterns are more violent than anything Earth has ever produced. When you finally return to the safety of the city's interior, you feel a profound sense of relief that surprises you. You've only been outside for 20 minutes, and already you're grateful to be back behind solid walls and breathing filtered air. That evening, over dinner, you compare notes with your fellow tourists again. The consensus is that New Olympia is impressive from an engineering standpoint, but the psychological stress of living in such a hostile environment is much greater than anyone expected. I keep thinking about the emergency shelters, admits Hiroshi Yamamoto. What if we need them? What if something goes wrong? His father tries to reassure him, but you can see that Takeshi is asking himself the same questions. This family clearly expected a space adventure, not a constant confrontation with mortality. Klaus Weber's condition seems to be worsening. His cough is more persistent, and he's using his oxygen supplement more frequently. When you ask him about it, he just shrugs and says, "The atmospheric pressure is more challenging than I expected. I'm sure I'll adjust soon." But you notice that Dr. Rodriguez has been checking on Klaus more frequently than the other tourists, and that evening you see him having a lengthy conversation with the medical staff. Margaret Chen remains the most stoic of the group, but even she admits that living in New Olympia requires constant mental adjustment. "I've worked in hostile environments before," she tells you, "but never one where the entire planet seems actively malevolent. Venus doesn't just want to kill you, it wants to dissolve you, crush you, and incinerate you simultaneously." As you fall asleep on your second night, listening to the constant rumble of Venus's atmosphere and the hum of the life support systems, you find yourself wondering if the remaining 12 days of your vacation are going to get easier or more difficult. The next morning, you get your answer. You wake up on day 3 to an announcement over the city's intercom system that immediately sets your nerves on edge. "Attention all residents and visitors. Due to increased atmospheric activity, the city is currently experiencing minor fluctuations in power and atmospheric processing. All systems are functioning within normal parameters. This is a routine weather-related situation." Routine weather-related situation. You're beginning to realize that on Venus, routine and potentially fatal are not mutually exclusive concepts. The view from your hotel room window confirms that something has changed overnight. The lightning activity has intensified dramatically. Instead of the occasional flicker you observed yesterday, the clouds are now almost continuously illuminated by electrical discharges. Some of the lightning bolts are massive, stretching across kilometers of sky and lasting for several seconds at a time. But more unsettling than the lightning is the color of the clouds themselves. Yesterday's yellow and brown sulfuric acid clouds have taken on darker, more ominous hues, deep oranges and rusty reds that speak of increased chemical activity in the atmosphere around the city. At breakfast, the difference in your fellow tourists is immediately apparent. Klaus Weber looks genuinely ill. His skin has taken on a greyish pallor and his breathing is clearly laboured despite constant use of his oxygen supplement. The Yamamoto family is clustered together at their table, speaking in hushed Japanese and casting nervous glances at the increasingly violent weather outside. Even Margaret Chen, who has been remarkably stoic throughout the experience so far, seems subdued this morning. When you ask her about it, she explains what she's observed as someone with extensive experience in atmospheric engineering. "The chemical composition of the clouds around us has changed," she says, gesturing toward the windows. "When I worked on Venus atmospheric studies 20 years ago, we documented how certain weather patterns can concentrate sulfuric acid vapor in localized areas. I think we're moving into one of those concentration zones." "What does that mean for us?" Margaret's expression grows serious. "It means the atmospheric processes are going to have to work harder to keep the air breathable inside the city. It also means that equipment degradation is going to accelerate and the risk of system failures increases." As if to underscore her point, the lights in the restaurant flicker momentarily, and you hear the subtle change in the hum of the atmospheric processing systems as they ramp up to handle increased demand. Dr. Harrison appears at your table during breakfast, looking more concerned than you've seen him before. "I wanted to let you know that we're monitoring a significant weather system that's approaching the city," he says. "It's what we call a sulfur storms, a concentration of particularly acidic clouds that creates challenging conditions for our atmospheric processing systems." "How challenging?" asks Takeshi Yamamoto, clearly worried about his family's safety. "Well, we've never experienced a storm of this magnitude during tourist season," Dr. Harrison admits. "Our models suggest the city can handle it, but it will mean increased stress on all our systems and some potential disruptions to normal activities." Never experienced a storm of this magnitude during tourist season. That's not the kind of thing you want to hear while you're floating 50 kilometers above a hellscape in a city that depends entirely on technology to keep you alive. The morning's scheduled activity is a tour of the city's hydroponic gardens, where New Olympia grows its fresh food. Under normal circumstances, this would probably be an interesting glimpse into how humans can create sustainable agriculture in the most hostile environment imaginable. But as your tour group makes its way to the agricultural section, it becomes clear that normal circumstances no longer apply. The hydroponic gardens are located in the city's mid-levels, housed in a series of transparent domes that allow natural sunlight to reach the growing plants. Or at least, that's how they're supposed to work. This morning, the sunlight filtering through Venus's atmosphere has taken on an ominous orange-red tint that makes the entire agricultural area look like it's lit by the fires of hell. The unusual light conditions are due to increased particulate matter in the atmosphere, explains Dr. Lisa Park, the city's chief agricultural engineer. It's a temporary situation related to the current weather patterns. But as Dr. Park leads you through the growing areas, you can see that the temporary situation is already having effects. Many of the plants look stressed, their leaves are yellowing, and some are showing signs of chemical burn despite being grown in carefully controlled environments. "We're having to increase our atmospheric filtering in the agricultural domes," Dr. Park explains when Margaret Chen asks about the plant damage. "Even with our best filtration systems, trace amounts of sulfuric acid vapor are getting through at levels higher than usual." If the acid vapor is getting through the filtration systems designed to protect the plants, you can't help but wonder what it's doing to the humans in the city. Klaus Weber has to sit down halfway through the tour, his breathing clearly laboured and his colour getting worse. Doctor. Rodriguez appears almost immediately. She's clearly been keeping a close watch on him, and after a brief examination, she quietly suggests that Klaus might want to spend the rest of the day in his room with supplemental oxygen. "I'm fine," Klaus insists, but his voice is weak and he's clearly struggling. "It's just the altitude adjustment." Dr. Rodriguez doesn't look convinced, and neither do you. Klaus's condition seems to be deteriorating rapidly, and the altitude adjustment explanation is starting to sound less plausible. The tour concludes with a visit to the agricultural processing facility, where you learn another unsettling detail about life on New Olympia. All water used in the city must be constantly recycled and purified, not just because water is precious in space, but because even the city's sophisticated filtration systems can't completely eliminate all traces of sulfuric acid from the atmospheric moisture. We process every drop of water in the city at least 6 times before it's considered safe for human consumption, Dr. Park explains. Even so, we recommend that visitors limit their intake of locally processed water and rely primarily on imported supplies. Imported supplies that are stored in tanks that are also subject to gradual acid corrosion, you realize. There's literally no escaping the fact that Venus is slowly trying to dissolve everything human-made that comes into contact with its environment. The afternoon brings news that makes the situation even more concerning. Captain Santos announces that due to the intensifying weather conditions, the Venus Express will be extending its stay at New Olympia by an additional 3 days as a safety precaution. 3 extra days floating in an increasingly hostile atmosphere while the storm system intensifies around you. The vacation you paid for is now going to last 17 days instead of 14, and those extra days are going to be spent in conditions that are apparently too dangerous for the ship to attempt departure. The storm system is larger and more intense than our initial projections suggested, Captain Santos explains to the gathered tourists and residents. Rather than risk exposure to severe atmospheric turbulence during departure, we'll wait for conditions to improve. This is when you begin to realize that Venus tourism involves a level of weather dependency that makes commercial aviation look utterly predictable by comparison. You're not just dealing with the possibility of flight delays, you're dealing with the possibility of being trapped in a floating city while a planet-sized storm system rages around you. That evening's dinner is a subdued affair. Klaus Weber is absent, reportedly resting in his room under medical supervision. The Yamamoto family picks at their food while casting worried glances at the increasingly violent lightning display outside. Even the restaurant staff seem more tense than usual, and you notice that several of them are wearing small breathing masks, a precaution against elevated acid vapor levels in the city's air supply. The view from the restaurant windows is both spectacular and terrifying. The lightning has become almost constant now, turning the entire cloud deck into a massive, flickering light show. But these aren't the beautiful, distant electrical displays you admired on your first night. These are violent, chaotic discharges that illuminate massive, churning cloud formations that seem to dwarf the city. It's like watching the planet's immune system trying to reject us, Margaret Chen observes, as you watch a particularly massive lightning bolt stretch across the horizon. Venus has been perfecting its hostility for billions of years, and we're like bacteria trying to survive in an environment that's designed to sterilize anything that doesn't belong. Her observation proves to be more prescient than you realize at the time. As you prepare for bed on your 3rd night, the constant rumble of Venus's atmosphere has grown noticeably louder. The city's stabilization systems are working harder to keep New Olympia steady in the increasingly turbulent air currents, and you can feel the subtle vibrations as the entire structure responds to atmospheric pressures unlike anything experienced during the previous test phases. You fall asleep to the sound of what can only be described as planetary rage, the combined roar of winds, lightning, and chemical reactions occurring on a scale that makes terrestrial weather seem gentle by comparison. And in your dreams, you float in an endless sea of acid clouds while the very atmosphere around you tries to dissolve the tiny bubble of human technology that's keeping you alive. When you wake up on day 4, you discover that Venus has decided to escalate the situation. You're awakened at 5:30 a.m. by an emergency alarm that you've never heard before, a sharp, urgent tone that cuts through your sleep like a blade. The lights in your hotel room strobe in sync with the alarm, and a calm but insistent voice comes over the intercom. Attention all residents and visitors. We are currently experiencing a Level 2 atmospheric event. Please remain in your quarters until further notice. This is not a drill. Level 2 atmospheric event. Those words send a chill down your spine, partly because they sound ominous and partly because you realize you have no idea what the different levels mean or how high the scale goes. Through your hotel room window, the reason for the emergency becomes immediately apparent. The storm that was approaching yesterday has arrived with a vengeance. The clouds outside are no longer the relatively stable layers you've grown accustomed to. They're churning masses of dark, angry vapor, illuminated by lightning so intense and constant that it's like looking into a cosmic strobe light. But more unsettling than the visual display is the sound. The rumble that you've been hearing since your arrival has intensified into a roar that penetrates even the city's advanced soundproofing. Venus is no longer growling at you, it's screaming. The intercom crackles to life again. Due to current atmospheric conditions, all tourist activities are suspended until further notice. Meal service will be provided in individual quarters. Medical staff are available for any health concerns related to atmospheric exposure. Atmospheric exposure. That's a phrase that makes you suddenly very aware of every breath you take. You spend the next several hours in your room watching the storm rage outside and trying to understand what you're seeing. The lightning isn't just frequent now, it's constant, turning the entire visible atmosphere into a flickering, chaotic light show that hurts to look at directly. Some of the bolts are enormous, stretching across what must be hundreds of kilometers of sky and lasting for 10 or 15 seconds at a time. But it's not just the intensity of the storm that's unsettling, it's the way it seems to be interacting with the city itself. You can see the force fields that protect New Olympia's exterior surfaces, flickering and sparkling as they deflect charged particles and acid droplets. The city's structural supports are glowing faintly from electrical discharge, and occasionally you can see actual streams of electricity flowing along the exterior surfaces of the buildings. Around noon, Dr. Rodriguez appears at your door with what she describes as precautionary medical supplies, a breathing mask, eye protection, and several doses of medication to counteract increased acid exposure. How bad is it out there, you ask as she checks your vital signs. We're experiencing atmospheric conditions that are more severe than our initial projections anticipated, she says diplomatically. The storm system has intensified beyond the parameters we planned for, which means our atmospheric processing systems are working at maximum capacity. And Klaus, how is he doing? Dr. Rodriguez's expression grows more serious. Mr. Weber is experiencing what we're calling acute atmospheric sensitivity syndrome. His respiratory system is having difficulty adapting to the current environmental conditions, and we've moved him to our medical facility for closer monitoring. Acute atmospheric sensitivity syndrome. Another euphemism for a condition that the tourism brochures probably didn't mention. Is he going to be okay? We're doing everything we can to manage his symptoms, Dr. Rodriguez says. But I want you to understand that some people simply don't adapt well to Venus's atmospheric conditions, especially during severe weather events like this one. After Dr. Rodriguez leaves, you spend the afternoon trying to stay calm while the storm rages outside. The city's systems are clearly under strain, the lights flicker periodically, the air circulation system sounds labored, and there's a subtle vibration in the floors and walls that suggests New Olympia is being buffeted by atmospheric forces beyond anything it was designed to handle. Around 4 p.m. you get a knock on your door from Hiroshi Yamamoto. The teenager looks scared and exhausted, and he's wearing one of the emergency breathing masks. "Can you come check on my sister?" he asks. "She's been feeling really sick, and my parents are worried." You follow Hiroshi to the Yamamoto family's suite, where you find a scene that breaks your heart. Little Keiko is lying in bed, clearly unwell, while her parents hover over her with expressions of barely controlled panic. Her skin has taken on a greyish pallor similar to Klaus Weber's, and her breathing is shallow and laboured. "She started feeling sick this morning when the alarms went off," Takeshi explains. "At first we thought it was just fear, but it's getting worse." Mrs. Yamamoto says something in rapid Japanese, and Takeshi translates, "She says Keiko feels like she can't breathe, even with the mask." You're not a medical professional, but it's clear that Keiko is having the same kind of respiratory distress that Klaus experienced. The Venusian atmosphere is somehow affecting certain people more severely than others, and the current storm conditions are making it worse. "Have you called Dr. Rodriguez?" you ask. "She's already been here twice," Takeshi says. "She gave Keiko medication and said to monitor her condition, but..." He gestures helplessly at his daughter, who is clearly getting worse rather than better. You stay with the Yamamoto family for several hours, trying to provide whatever comfort and support you can, while Keiko struggles with breathing difficulties that seem to be getting worse as the storm intensifies outside. It's during this time that you begin to understand the true psychological cost of Venus tourism. It's not just the physical challenges of living in a hostile environment, it's the constant awareness that you're completely dependent on technology for survival, combined with the growing realization that the technology might not be sufficient to protect you from everything Venus can throw at you. The storm outside has intensified to the point where looking out the windows is genuinely disturbing. The lightning is so constant and intense that it creates a stroboscopic effect that makes it hard to focus on anything. The city's exterior force fields are visibly struggling, flickering and sparking as they deflect massive electrical discharges and concentrated acid vapor. And through it all, you can hear Venus itself. A deep, planetary rumble that seems to come from everywhere at once, as if the entire world is expressing its displeasure at the tiny human intrusion floating in its atmosphere. Evening brings more bad news. Captain Santos announces that the Venus Express's departure has been delayed indefinitely due to atmospheric conditions that make launch inadvisable. The storm system has grown larger and more intense than any weather pattern previously recorded in Venus's atmosphere, and attempting to leave the city's protection would expose the ship to electrical and chemical conditions that could potentially be fatal. We will continue to monitor atmospheric conditions and will announce a departure schedule as soon as it's safe to do so, Captain Santos says over the intercom. But there's something in her voice, a tension that suggests she's as concerned about the situation as anyone else. That night, as you try to sleep while Venus roars outside your window, you find yourself thinking about the true nature of your situation. You're trapped on a floating city in the atmosphere of the most hostile planet in the solar system during a storm that's more severe than anything the city was designed to handle, with no way to leave until the weather improves. And the weather shows no signs of improving. In fact, as you drift off to sleep, you can't shake the feeling that Venus has only just begun to show you what it's capable of. You wake up on day 5 to silence, which is somehow more unsettling than the roaring storm had been. The emergency alarms have stopped, the constant rumble of wind has quieted, and even the ever-present hum of the atmospheric processes seems muted. But when you look out your hotel window, you understand why the silence is more frightening than the noise was. The storm hasn't passed, it's evolved into something worse. Instead of the chaotic lightning and churning clouds of yesterday, you now see a vast, stable mass of deep orange and red vapor that extends to the horizon in every direction. New Olympia is completely enclosed in what looks like a massive cloud of concentrated acid. The intercom crackles to life. Attention all residents and visitors. We are currently experiencing a level 3 atmospheric event characterized by elevated sulfuric acid concentrations in the surrounding atmosphere. All personnel should limit physical activity and report any respiratory distress immediately. Atmospheric processing systems are operating at maximum capacity. Level 3. The scale just keeps going up. Your first indication of how bad things have gotten comes when you try to take a shower. The water that comes from the taps has a distinctly yellowish tint and smells strongly of chemicals. When you mention this to the automated room service system, you receive a cheerful message explaining that, due to current atmospheric conditions, all water supplies are experiencing elevated mineral content and are safe for consumption after boiling. Elevated mineral content. That's a euphemistic way of saying your water supply is contaminated with sulfuric acid. Breakfast is delivered to your room instead of being served in the restaurant, and the difference in food quality is immediately apparent. Everything tastes strongly of chemicals, and the fresh fruits and vegetables that were available just yesterday have been replaced with processed, preserved foods that can withstand the current contamination levels. The meal comes with a note explaining that due to atmospheric processing challenges, fresh food production has been temporarily suspended as a precautionary measure. This is when you realize that Venus isn't just trying to dissolve the city's infrastructure, it's contaminating the food supply as well. Around mid-morning, you receive an urgent knock on your door. It's Dr. Rodriguez, and she looks more stressed than you've seen her since the journey began. "I need to ask you some questions about how you're feeling," she says as she enters your room with a portable medical scanner. "Are you experiencing any respiratory distress, skin irritation, or changes in your sense of taste or smell?" You realize that you have been experiencing all of those things, but you'd attributed them to normal adaptation to the Venusian environment. The persistent metallic taste has gotten stronger, your skin feels irritated and slightly burned despite not being exposed to direct sunlight, and you've developed a nagging cough that you hadn't really paid attention to until now. These symptoms are more severe than we typically see during atmospheric adaptation, Dr. Rodriguez explains as she reviews the scanner results. The current storm has created acid vapor concentrations that are higher than our atmospheric processes were designed to handle completely. We're keeping everyone alive and healthy, but there's some breakthrough contamination that's affecting everyone in the city. Breakthrough contamination. The city's life support systems are being overwhelmed, and Venus is slowly seeping in. How dangerous is it, you ask? At current exposure levels, the health effects are temporary and treatable, Dr. Rodriguez says. But if the storm continues to intensify, or if our atmospheric processing capacity is further compromised, the situation could become more serious. After Dr. Rodriguez leaves, you spend the rest of the morning trying to process the implications of what she told you. The city that was supposed to provide a safe haven from Venus's hostile environment is being gradually infiltrated by that same environment. You're not just visiting Venus, Venus is slowly visiting you, one molecule of sulfuric acid vapor at a time. The afternoon brings news about your fellow tourists that makes the situation even more sobering. Klaus Weber has been moved to the city's intensive care unit, where he's receiving round-the-clock treatment for what Dr. Clock Rodriguez now describes as severe atmospheric poisoning. His respiratory system is failing to cope with even the filtered air inside the city, and his condition continues to deteriorate. Little Keiko Yamamoto isn't doing much better. She's been moved to the medical facility as well, where she's receiving supplemental oxygen and medication to counteract the effects of acid exposure. Her parents spend most of their time at her bedside, and when you see them in the hallway, they look exhausted and terrified. "She's so little," Mrs. Yamamoto says in heavily accented English when you ask about Keiko's condition. "Venus too big, too much for small girl." Her simple words capture something that all the technical explanations have failed to convey. Venus isn't just hostile, it's overwhelmingly, impossibly hostile. It's a planetary-scale manifestation of everything that can kill you, concentrated into an environment that actively works to dissolve, crush, burn, and poison anything that doesn't belong there. Margaret Chen remains the most stoic of your group, but even she admits that the current situation is beyond what any of them expected. "I've worked in hostile environments my entire career," she tells you over your chemical tasting lunch. But Venus isn't just hostile, it's malevolent. It's as if the planet has spent billions of years developing new and creative ways to be deadly. The view from your hotel window confirms Margaret's assessment. The acid clouds surrounding the city have taken on an almost organic appearance, swirling and flowing in patterns that look less like weather and more like the planet's immune system responding to an infection. And occasionally you can see streams of more concentrated acid vapor flowing directly toward the city, as if Venus is actively targeting New Olympia for dissolution. The city's systems are clearly struggling. Power fluctuations are becoming more frequent and more severe. The atmospheric processes are running constantly at maximum capacity, producing a mechanical whine that penetrates every corner of the city. And most unsettling of all, you can see signs of actual corrosion on the city's internal structures. Subtle etching on metal surfaces, discoloration of supposedly acid-resistant materials, and a general sense that the city itself is slowly being eaten away from the inside. Late in the afternoon, Engineer Martinez makes an announcement that sends a chill through everyone in the city. Due to increased atmospheric acid concentrations, we are implementing emergency conservation protocols for all life support systems. Residents and visitors should minimize physical activity and report any equipment malfunctions immediately. Emergency conservation protocols. The city's life support systems are being rationed because Venus is trying to dissolve them faster than they can be maintained. That evening, you join Margaret Chen in one of the lower observation areas where you can watch the acid clouds swirling below the city. It's a hypnotic and deeply unsettling sight, like watching an ocean of chemical death that extends to the horizon in every direction. "You know what bothers me most about this," Margaret says as you both watch the corrosive fog flowing around the city's support structures. "It's not just that Venus is trying to kill us, it's that it's succeeding, slowly but inevitably." "What do you mean?" "Look around." She gestures at the visible corrosion on the observation deck's supports. "Every breath we take brings more acid into our lungs. Every drop of water we drink contains sulfuric compounds. Every surface in this city is being slowly eaten away by an atmosphere that treats metal like sugar in acid rain." She pauses, watching a particularly dense stream of orange vapor flow past the window. "Venus isn't just hostile, it's patient. It doesn't need to kill us quickly. It can afford to take its time and dissolve us gradually, piece by piece, breath by breath." As you prepare for bed on your fifth night, listening to the constant whine of the atmospheric processes working at maximum capacity, you find yourself wondering how much longer the city's systems can hold out against Venus's patient assault. The planet has spent billions of years perfecting its toxicity, while human technology has had only a few years to develop defenses. And Venus, it seems, is winning. Your dreams that night are filled with images of dissolution, metal corroding, flesh burning, and the tiny bubble of human technology that's protecting you, slowly shrinking as the vast acid ocean of Venus's atmosphere presses in from all sides. When you wake up on day 6, you discover that those dreams weren't entirely fictional. You wake up to the sound of emergency sirens and an announcement that makes your blood run cold. "Attention all residents and visitors. We are currently experiencing a level 4 atmospheric event with critical system failures. All personnel must report to designated emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Level 4. And critical system failures." Through your hotel window, you can see why the situation has escalated so dramatically. The acid cloud that had surrounded the city yesterday has intensified into something that looks like liquid orange death. The concentration of sulfuric acid vapor is so high that it's actually visible as flowing streams and pools of corrosive gas, and you can see it eating away at the city's exterior surfaces in real time. But most terrifying of all, you can see gaps in the city's protective force fields, dark areas where the energy barriers that have been keeping the acid at bay have failed completely, allowing Venus's atmosphere to begin flowing directly into the city's superstructure. You grab your emergency breathing apparatus and join the stream of residents and tourists making their way to the emergency shelters located in the city's lower levels. The hallways are filled with the acrid smell of chemical contamination, and you can see actual wisps of yellowish vapor seeping through ventilation grates that were supposed to be sealed against atmospheric intrusion. The emergency shelter is a hardened compartment deep in the city's core, designed to maintain life support even if the main atmospheric processes fail completely. As you file into the cramped space with about 100 other people, you're struck by how small and fragile humanity's foothold on Venus really is. This shelter, perhaps 50 meters across, represents the absolute last line of defense between you and an entire planet that wants you dead. Margaret Chen finds you in the crowd and fills you in on what she's learned from the engineering staff. Multiple atmospheric processes have failed due to acid corrosion beyond their design tolerances, she explains. The storm has been concentrating sulfuric acid vapor to levels that are literally dissolving the city's filtration systems faster than they can be repaired. How long can the emergency systems keep us alive, you ask? According to the original specifications, about a week, Margaret says. But those specifications assumed normal atmospheric conditions, not the kind of concentrated acid bath we're dealing with now. The Yamamoto family is huddled together near one of the shelter's medical stations. Both children are now receiving supplemental oxygen, and their parents look like they've aged 10 years in the past few days. Klaus Weber is absent. He's being moved to the shelter's intensive care unit, where he's fighting for his life against what Dr. Rodriguez now openly describes as severe acid poisoning. His respiratory system has been compromised by prolonged exposure to trace sulfuric compounds, she explains to the gathered tourists. We're doing everything we can, but his condition remains critical. This is when the reality of Venus tourism finally hits you with full force. You're not just uncomfortable or inconvenienced, you're in genuine danger of dying, slowly and painfully, as Venus's atmosphere dissolves your body from the inside out. The shelter's main screen displays a constant stream of data about the city's condition, and none of it is reassuring. Atmospheric processes are failing faster than they can be repaired. The protective force fields are flickering and collapsing in several areas. Most alarmingly, the structural integrity of the city itself is being compromised as acid vapor infiltrates areas that were supposed to be completely sealed. Engineer Martinez makes an announcement that she clearly doesn't want to make. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to be honest about our situation. New Olympia is experiencing system failures beyond our design parameters. We are currently running on emergency power and backup atmospheric processing, and our repair teams are working around the clock to maintain critical systems. She pauses, looking around at the faces of the people whose lives depend on her city's technology. However, I need you to understand that if conditions don't improve soon, we may need to consider emergency evacuation procedures. Emergency evacuation procedures. That means abandoning the city and trying to survive in small escape pods while waiting for rescue. Rescue that might not come if Venus's atmosphere is too hostile for other ships to approach. The afternoon brings more bad news. The Venus Express, which was supposed to be your ride home, has suffered significant damage to its exterior hull from acid exposure while docked at the city. Captain Santos explains that the ship's protective coating has been eaten away to the point where attempting launch would risk catastrophic structural failure. We're working with New Olympia's engineering teams to develop repair procedures, she announces over the shelter's intercom. But I need to be clear that the Express will not be able to depart until we can ensure the ship's structural integrity. This is when you realize that you're not just stranded on Venus until the storm passes. You might be stranded indefinitely while both the city and your means of escape are slowly dissolved by an atmosphere that seems to be growing more corrosive by the hour. The evening brings the first casualty of your Venus vacation. Klaus Weber dies at 8:47 p.m., his respiratory system finally overwhelmed by the accumulated effects of breathing Venus's atmosphere even through the city's most advanced filtration systems. Dr. Rodriguez makes the announcement to the shelter with tears in her eyes. Klaus fought bravely against conditions that no human being should ever have to endure, she says. His death reminds us all of the very real dangers we're facing here. The Yamamoto family takes the news particularly hard. Klaus had befriended their children during the journey, and his death makes the threat to little Keiko seem even more immediate and terrifying. Mrs. Yamamoto spends the evening crying quietly while her husband tries to comfort both her and the children. That night, as you lie on your emergency cot listening to the shelter's life support systems struggle to keep the acid at bay, you finally understand what Margaret Chen meant when she said Venus was patient. The planet doesn't need to kill you quickly with a single catastrophic event. It can afford to slowly dissolve your protection, your equipment, your very body, molecule by molecule until there's nothing left. Venus has been practicing this kind of patient lethality for 4 billion years. Humanity has been trying to resist it for less than 4 years. The outcome was never really in doubt. You wake up on day 7 to an announcement that changes everything. Attention all residents and visitors. Long-range sensors have detected a rescue fleet approaching Venus from Earth, lunar space. Estimated arrival is 6 to 8 days, depending on atmospheric conditions. All personnel should prepare for emergency evacuation procedures. A rescue fleet. The admission that rescue is necessary tells you everything you need to know about how badly wrong this Venus tourism experiment has gone. The emergency shelter has become a miniature city of its own, housing nearly 300 people in a space designed for temporary occupation by 50. The air is thick with the smell of recycled atmosphere and human fear, and everywhere you look, you see the signs of a population under extreme stress. Little Keiko Yamamoto is getting worse. Her breathing is shallow and laboured even with supplemental oxygen, and her skin has taken on the greyish pallor that preceded Klaus Weber's death. Her parents haven't left her side in over 24 hours, and when you see them, they look like people watching their child slowly slip away. The doctor says her small body cannot fight the poison like adult, Takeshi explains when you ask about Keiko's condition. The acid in air, it builds up faster in children, too much for her to clear. This is when you learn one of the most horrifying aspects of Venus tourism that no one mentioned in the promotional materials. Children are significantly more susceptible to atmospheric poisoning than adults. Their smaller body mass and higher metabolic rate means they absorb sulfuric compounds more quickly and have less capacity to process the toxins. Keiko isn't just having a bad vacation. She's dying of acid poisoning on a planet that humanity never should have tried to visit. Dr. Rodriguez confirms what the Yamamoto family already knows. Children's respiratory systems are more vulnerable to chemical contamination, she explains to the gathered families in the shelter. We're doing everything we can to support Keiko and the other young tourists, but our medical resources are limited. The other young tourists. You hadn't realized that several other children in the city are also showing signs of severe atmospheric poisoning. Venus's patient assault isn't discriminating, it's simply killing the most vulnerable first. Margaret Chen has spent the morning working with the engineering teams, trying to understand the full extent of New Olympia's system failures. Her report to the shelter community is sobering. The city's atmospheric processes are failing faster than they can be repaired, she explains. The current acid concentrations are beyond anything we designed for, and the filtration systems are being eaten away from the inside. We're essentially fighting a losing battle against a planet-scale chemical weapon. How long can the city hold out? Someone asks. Margaret's pause tells you the answer before she speaks. At current failure rates, we have perhaps 3 to 4 days before life support becomes completely unreliable. The rescue fleet needs to arrive soon, or she doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't need to. The view from the shelter's limited observation windows shows why the situation is so desperate. The acid cloud surrounding New Olympia has evolved from orange to a deep, angry red that suggests concentrations of sulfuric vapor approaching industrial levels. You can actually see the city's exterior structures dissolving. Support beams thinning, surface panels pitting and warping, entire sections of the outer hull being eaten away by atmospheric contact. Venus has stopped being patient. It's now actively devouring the human intrusion in its atmosphere, and it's winning decisively. The afternoon brings more equipment failures. The shelter's main atmospheric processor develops a leak in its acid filtration system, filling the air with a chemical smell that makes everyone's eyes water and triggers coughing fits. Emergency repairs manage to contain the leak, but the incident reminds everyone how thin the margin of survival has become. You spend part of the afternoon with the Yamamoto family, trying to provide whatever comfort you can as Keiko struggles with breathing that's getting progressively more difficult. The little girl is conscious but clearly suffering, and her parents' anguish is heartbreaking to witness. "We wanted to show the children the wonders of space," Mrs. Yamamoto says quietly. "We never imagined." "You couldn't have known," you try to reassure her. "No one warned us that Venus would be this dangerous." But even as you say it, you realize that's not entirely true. The warnings were there. buried in legal disclaimers and euphemistic language hidden behind marketing materials that emphasized adventure and unique experiences while downplaying the very real risks of visiting the most hostile environment in the solar system. Venus tourism exists because people wanted to believe that human technology could protect them from anything, even a planet that has spent billions of years perfecting the art of being deadly. Evening brings news of the first structural failure in the city's main hull. A section of the outer shell in the agricultural district has been eaten through by acid exposure, allowing Venus's atmosphere to flow directly into what was supposed to be a protected area. The breach is quickly sealed with emergency foam, but the incident demonstrates how rapidly the city's defenses are deteriorating. "We're basically patching holes in a ship that's sinking in an ocean of acid," one of the engineering technicians mutters as he reports the hull breach to Engineer Martinez. That night, as you lie in your emergency cot surrounded by the sounds of failing life support systems and people coughing from trace acid exposure, you find yourself thinking about the fundamental hubris that created Venus tourism in the first place. Humanity looked at Venus, a world with surface conditions that can melt lead, atmospheric pressure that can crush submarines, and an atmosphere composed of poison gas and corrosive acid, and decided it would make a good vacation destination. The planet's response has been unambiguous. Venus doesn't want tourists. It doesn't want human cities floating in its atmosphere. It doesn't want anything to do with a species arrogant enough to think that a few years of technological development could overcome billions of years of planetary-scale hostility. And Venus is making its point very effectively by slowly dissolving everyone and everything that dared to visit. As you drift off to sleep, you can hear little Keiko Yamamoto coughing in the medical area, and you know that tomorrow will bring more system failures, more casualties, and a clearer understanding of why Venus tourism was doomed from the moment someone first conceived of it. You wake up to silence in the medical area, and you know immediately what it means. Little Keiko Yamamoto died sometime during the night, her small body finally overwhelmed by the accumulated effects of breathing Venus's atmosphere for 8 days. The announcement comes over the shelter's intercom at 7,000 a.m. It is with deep sadness that we inform you of the death of Keiko Yamamoto at 1047 this morning. Our thoughts are with the Yamamoto family during this difficult time. The Yamamoto family's grief is devastating to witness. Hiroshi, Keiko's twin brother, hasn't spoken since he was told of his sister's death. Their parents alternate between shock and raw anguish, and their father keeps repeating the same phrase in Japanese, something that Margaret Chen, who speaks some Japanese from her terraforming work, quietly translates as, "We killed our daughter." This is when the full moral weight of Venus tourism hits you. These aren't adventurers who died pursuing extreme sports or explorers who knew the risks they were taking. These are families who were sold a luxury space experience and ended up watching their children die slowly from acid poisoning on a planet that never should have been marketed as a tourist destination. Dr. Rodriguez's morning medical briefing confirms what everyone in the shelter already knows. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. "We now have 12 people in critical condition due to atmospheric poisoning," she announces. "Our medical supplies are running low and the emergency life support systems are showing signs of acid corrosion." 12 people in critical condition. Out of fewer than 300 tourists and residents, that's a casualty rate that would be shocking in a war zone, let alone on a vacation. The rescue fleet's progress report provides the only hopeful news of the day. The ships are making good time and should arrive within 4 days. But the report also includes a sobering detail. The rescue operation will be extremely dangerous due to Venus's current atmospheric conditions, and there's no guarantee that all ships will be able to successfully dock with the failing city. Rescue operations in Venus's atmosphere are inherently high risk, the fleet commander's message explains. Current acid concentrations are beyond safe operational parameters for our ships, which means we'll be operating at the limits of our protective systems. Even the rescue is going to be a life-threatening adventure. Venus doesn't want anyone in its atmosphere, including the people trying to save the tourists who made the mistake of coming here in the first place. Margaret Chen spends most of the morning working with the city's remaining engineering staff, and her afternoon report to the shelter community is grimmer than anything you've heard yet. New Olympia is dying, she says bluntly. The atmospheric processes are failing faster than we can repair them, the hull integrity is compromised in multiple areas, and the city's structural supports are being eaten away by acid infiltration. She pauses, looking around at the faces of the people who trusted their lives to this floating city. We estimate that the city has perhaps 2 days of viable life support remaining. After that, the atmospheric contamination will reach levels that are incompatible with human survival. 2 days. The rescue fleet is still 3 to 4 days away. The mathematics of survival on Venus have become very simple and very stark. The planet is going to kill the city before help can arrive unless something changes dramatically. The afternoon brings more system failures and more evidence of Venus's inexorable assault on human technology. The shelter's water purification system develops multiple leaks in its acid filtration components, forcing everyone to ration water that tastes increasingly of sulfur and chemicals. The main lighting system fails in several sections, casting parts of the shelter into a perpetual chemical twilight that makes the already claustrophobic space feel even more oppressive. But most unsettling of all, you can see actual corrosion appearing on surfaces inside the shelter itself, metal fixtures turning green and black, wall panels developing spots and streaks where acid vapor has found its way through supposedly sealed joints. The shelter that was supposed to be humanity's last line of defense against Venus is being slowly eaten away from the inside. The acid is everywhere, one of the maintenance technicians explains when you ask about the visible corrosion. It's in the air, in the water, in the metal itself. We're not just fighting atmospheric contamination, we're fighting the fundamental chemistry of this planet. That evening, you join a small group gathered around one of the shelter's observation windows, watching the red acid clouds swirl around the dying city. The view is simultaneously beautiful and horrifying, like watching a slow-motion planetary execution carried out with chemical precision. "You know what I think about when I look out there," says David, the young waiter from your first night at the restaurant. "I think about how we came here voluntarily. We paid money to experience this. We looked at the most hostile environment in the solar system and thought, that looks like fun." He's right, and the realization is deeply unsettling. Venus didn't lure humanity into a trap. Humanity walked into this situation with eyes wide open, motivated by curiosity and the marketing promise of the ultimate extreme experience. Venus is simply being Venus, a world that has spent 4 billion years developing the most comprehensive catalogue of ways to kill living things that the universe has ever produced. The planet isn't malevolent or evil, it's just profoundly, fundamentally incompatible with life as we know it. Humans are the ones who decided that incompatibility would make for an exciting vacation. As you prepare for sleep on day 8, listening to the sounds of dying life support systems and people coughing up blood from acid exposure, you find yourself wondering how many more people will die before the rescue fleet arrives and whether the rescue operation will succeed or just add more casualties to Venus's growing list. The planet has been very patient with humanity's arrogance, allowing the tourism experiment to continue for days while slowly demonstrating why it was a terrible idea from the beginning. But Venus's patience appears to be running out, and tomorrow will bring new lessons in why some places in the universe should never be visited, no matter how advanced your technology or how confident your engineers. You wake up on day 9 to the worst possible sound, the failing whine of atmospheric processes shutting down. The emergency shelter's main life support system has finally succumbed to acid corrosion, leaving 300 people dependent on backup systems that were never designed to handle the current contamination levels. The morning announcement confirms what the dying machinery has already told you. Attention all residents and visitors. Primary atmospheric processing has ceased function due to critical system failures. We are now operating on emergency backup life support, which provides approximately 18 hours of breathable air at current occupancy levels. 18 hours. The rescue fleet is still 2 days away. Dr. Rodriguez's medical briefing is the grimmest yet. We now have 37 people in critical condition, and I need to be honest about our medical capabilities. We don't have enough resources to treat severe acid poisoning for much longer, and our pharmaceutical supplies are running dangerously low. 37 people in critical condition. The casualty rate is approaching 15% and climbing steadily as Venus's patient assault finally overwhelms human physiology. The Yamamoto family is preparing for another tragedy. Hiroshi, Keiko's twin brother, is now showing the same symptoms that preceded his sister's death: labored breathing, greyish skin, and the persistent cough that signals respiratory system failure. His parents sit beside his emergency cot with the exhausted resignation of people who have already lost one child and know they're about to lose another. "Venus doesn't want us here," Takeshi says quietly when you stop to check on them. "Maybe it never did." Margaret Chen has been working with the remaining engineering staff to implement what she describes as desperate measures, cannibalizing non-essential systems to keep the emergency life support running for a few more hours. Her report to the shelter community is brutally honest. "We're stripping components from every system we can access to maintain basic atmospheric processing," she explains. "We've scavenged parts from the city's lighting, heating, water purification, and even structural support systems. We might be able to extend breathable air for another 12 hours, but that's assuming no additional failures. 12 hours. And that's the optimistic scenario." The view from the shelter's observation windows shows why the city's systems are failing so catastrophically. The acid concentration outside has reached levels that are visibly corrosive. You can actually watch metal surfaces dissolving in real time. The city's exterior hull is pitted and scarred like the surface of a world that's been under chemical bombardment for years instead of days. Venus has escalated from patient hostility to active aggression, and human technology is surrendering on every front. The afternoon brings the first indication that the rescue operation might not succeed. A message from the fleet commander explains that Venus's current atmospheric conditions are beyond anything they've ever encountered, and several of their ships have already suffered significant acid damage just from approaching the planet. "We are experiencing equipment failures that were not anticipated in our rescue planning," the message states. "Current atmospheric acid concentrations are degrading our ship's protective systems faster than we can repair them. We will continue the rescue operation, but personnel should be prepared for the possibility that not all rescue vessels will be able to complete docking procedures. Not all rescue vessels will be able to complete docking procedures. Even the rescue is going to have casualties." This is when you fully understand the scale of the disaster that Venus tourism has become. It's not just that the vacation went wrong, it's that an entire industry based on visiting the most hostile environment in the solar system was fundamentally flawed from conception. Venus doesn't want visitors, and it has spent billions of years developing the tools to ensure that visitors don't survive. The evening brings news that engineer Martinez has been trying to avoid sharing. Structural analysis shows that New Olympia itself is approaching critical failure. The city's support framework is being eaten away by acid infiltration, and several of the main flotation balloons have developed leaks that are allowing corrosive atmosphere to contaminate their lifting gas. "The city is no longer structurally sound," Martinez announces to the shelter community. "We estimate that New Olympia will lose structural integrity within 12 to 18 hours, regardless of life support status. The city itself is dying. Even if the rescue fleet arrives on time, there might not be anything left to rescue people from." That night, as you lie in your emergency cot breathing increasingly contaminated air while listening to the death rattles of failing machinery, you find yourself thinking about the fundamental lesson that Venus has been trying to teach humanity. Some places in the universe are not meant for living things. Some environments are so hostile, so fundamentally antithetical to life, that visiting them isn't adventure. It's suicide with extra steps. Venus is a planet-sized example of everything that can kill you. concentrated into an environment that actively works to dissolve, crush, burn, and poison anything foolish enough to enter its domain. It's not a tourist destination, it's a cosmic reminder of humanity's limitations. The fact that people paid money to experience this environment, that families brought their children to this place, that an entire industry was built around the idea of vacationing on Venus, represents a failure of imagination so profound that it borders on collective madness. Venus has been trying to explain this to humanity for 8 days, using the universal language of dissolved metal, poisoned air, and slow death by chemical exposure. Tomorrow, on day 10, you'll discover whether humanity has finally learned to listen. You wake up on day 10 to the sound of emergency evacuation alarms and an announcement that brings both hope and terror. Attention all residents and visitors. Rescue fleet has arrived and is attempting emergency docking procedures. All personnel must prepare for immediate evacuation. Due to critical structural failures, this evacuation represents our only opportunity for survival. The rescue fleet has arrived just as New Olympia begins its final collapse. Through the shelter's observation windows, you can see the rescue ships approaching through Venus's acid clouds like metallic angels descending into hell. But these angels are already showing signs of damage. Their hulls are scarred and pitted from acid exposure, their protective fields are flickering, and at least one ship is trailing what looks like vapor from a hull breach. The rescue operation is going to be just as dangerous as staying in the dying city. Margaret Chen has spent the night working with the evacuation teams, and her briefing to the shelter community is characteristically direct. New Olympia is experiencing catastrophic structural failure. The city will collapse within hours, regardless of our life support status. The rescue ships can take most of us, but the docking procedures are extremely dangerous due to current atmospheric conditions. What does that mean? Someone asks. It means that some people might not make it to the rescue ships, Margaret says quietly. The docking bays are compromised, the approach routes are contaminated with concentrated acid vapor, and the city's structural stability is uncertain. Some people might not make it to the rescue ships. After everything you've endured, survival might come down to whether you can make it from the emergency shelter to a docking bay without being dissolved by Venus's atmosphere. The Yamamoto family faces the cruelest irony of all. Hiroshi is now too ill to be moved safely, his respiratory system too compromised to survive the evacuation process. His parents must choose between staying with their dying son in a collapsing city or leaving him behind to save themselves. "We cannot abandon Hiroshi," Takeshi says when Dr. Rodriguez explains the situation. "We lost Keiko. We will not lose our son alone." Their decision to stay with Hiroshi means that 3 more people will die when New Olympia collapses, but their choice is understandable. No parent should have to make the decision between their child's life and their own survival. The evacuation process begins at noon, with rescue teams in full environmental suits escorting small groups from the emergency shelter to the compromised docking bays. The journey through the city's corroded corridors is like walking through the digestive system of some cosmic creature. Walls weep with condensed acid vapor, floor panels sag under the weight of structural decay, and the air itself is thick with chemical contamination that makes breathing painful even through emergency filters. You're in the 3rd evacuation group, following rescue team members who move with the urgent efficiency of people who know they're working against time measured in minutes rather than hours. The corridors that once housed restaurants and shops are now corroded tunnels filled with the debris of dissolved civilization. The docking bay is a scene from a technological nightmare. The rescue ship's hull shows extensive acid damage from just the few hours it's been exposed to Venus's atmosphere. Automatic systems are struggling to maintain a sealed connection between the ship and the dying city, while emergency pumps work to keep the docking tube clear of acid vapor that keeps seeping in through corroded seals. Loading passengers onto the rescue ship is a process fraught with danger. The docking tube is partially compromised, meaning everyone must pass through areas where Venus's atmosphere is seeping in. Several people collapse during the boarding process, overcome by acid exposure that overwhelms their protective equipment. You make it aboard the rescue ship, but the experience leaves you with burns on your skin and a cough that suggests your lungs have been damaged by breathing concentrated sulfuric acid vapor. Looking around at your fellow evacuees, you see that everyone shows signs of acid exposure: burned skin, damaged breathing, and the characteristic grey pallor that indicates chemical poisoning. The rescue ship's departure from New Olympia is the most terrifying experience of your entire Venus ordeal. As the ship detaches from the collapsing city, you can see through the viewports how extensively Venus has damaged human technology. New Olympia looks like a partially dissolved carcass floating in an ocean of acid clouds, its structures collapsing and dissolving even as you watch. But the most heartbreaking sight is the observation deck, where the Yamamoto family chose to stay with their dying son. Through the transparent aluminum, you can see three small figures holding each other as their world literally dissolves around them. They wave at the departing rescue ships with the dignity of people who have chosen love over survival. The rescue ship's ascent through Venus's atmosphere is a running battle between human technology and planetary hostility. Acid vapor eats away at the hull in real time. Electrical storms bombard the ship with lightning strikes that overload the defensive systems, and atmospheric pressure changes stress the vessel's structure beyond design limits. Two of the rescue ships don't make it. You watch through your viewport as one vessel loses hull integrity during ascent and dissolves like sugar in acid rain, taking 37 people with it. Another ship suffers catastrophic engine failure and disappears into the acid clouds below, its distress signals quickly fading into the electrical chaos of Venus's atmosphere. The rescue operation that was supposed to save everyone instead becomes another demonstration of Venus's absolute dominion over its atmosphere. The planet doesn't just kill tourists, it kills the people trying to rescue tourists, and it does so with the same patient efficiency it applies to everything else. Your ship makes it out of Venus's atmosphere, but the cost is evident in every system aboard. The hull is scored and pitted, the life support systems are running on backup power, and half the rescue team is receiving medical treatment for acid exposure. The ship that was designed for rescue operations has been transformed into a barely functional emergency vessel by just a few hours in Venus's environment. As Venus shrinks to a point of light behind you, you realize that you've witnessed the end of humanity's most arrogant endeavor. Venus tourism is over, not because of regulations or economic factors, but because Venus itself has demonstrated conclusively that it doesn't want visitors. The planet has taught humanity a lesson in humility that cost dozens of lives and destroyed millions of dollars worth of the most advanced technology available. Venus has shown that no matter how sophisticated human engineering becomes, there are places in the universe that will always be fundamentally hostile to life. The marketing brochures promised the ultimate extreme experience, and Venus delivered exactly that. An experience so extreme that it killed people and dissolved cities, an environment so hostile that even trying to visit it was revealed as an act of profound foolishness. As you drift off to sleep in the rescue ship's medical bay, breathing recycled air and coughing up blood from acid exposure, you understand why Venus tourism will never happen again. Some worlds are not meant to be visited, some experiences are not meant to be survived, and Venus has spent 10 days making sure that humanity will never forget either lesson. 6 months later, as you sit in a comfortable chair in a medical facility on Luna, receiving treatment for the long-term effects of sulfuric acid exposure, you read the official report on the Venus tourism disaster with a mixture of recognition and disbelief. 43 people died during what the media dubbed the Venus incident. New Olympia was completely destroyed, dissolved by an atmosphere that the report describes as fundamentally incompatible with human life or human technology. The rescue operation cost an additional 8 lives and resulted in the total loss of 2 ships. The Venusian Tourism Consortium declared bankruptcy within weeks of the disaster. Venus tourism was permanently banned by every spacefaring government in the solar system. The Floating Cities project was abandoned, and Venus was officially designated as a no-human zone by the Solar Safety Authority. But the most important outcome of the Venus tourism disaster isn't found in official reports or insurance settlements, it's found in the fundamental shift in humanity's relationship with the hostile environments of space. Before Venus, humans believed that technology could overcome any environmental challenge. Engineers assured politicians that any world could be visited safely with sufficient preparation and advanced equipment. Mars had been colonized, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn hosted thriving communities, and even the asteroid belt had become a routine destination for miners and tourists. Venus changed all of that. Venus demonstrated that some places in the universe are so fundamentally hostile to life that visiting them isn't adventure, it's suicide with expensive equipment. The planet taught humanity a lesson in cosmic humility that no amount of theoretical study could have conveyed. There are worlds where the very atmosphere wants to dissolve you, where the weather patterns are more violent than anything terrestrial experience can prepare you for, where patient planetary hostility will inevitably overcome even the most advanced human technology. Venus showed humanity that the universe contains environments so alien, so antithetical to life, that the only rational response is to stay away. Your own experience serves as a permanent reminder of this lesson. The acid exposure during your 10 days in Venus's atmosphere has left you with chronic respiratory problems, skin sensitivity that will never fully heal, and a metallic taste that persists despite months of medical treatment. You're lucky to be alive, but you'll spend the rest of your life dealing with the effects of breathing Venus's atmosphere for just over a week. Klaus Weber and little Keiko Yamamoto weren't as fortunate. They died slowly and painfully, their bodies overwhelmed by chemical exposure that no medical technology could counteract. Their deaths serve as memorials to the fundamental error in judgment that created Venus tourism in the first place. The Yamamoto family's choice to stay with their dying son became a symbol of love, triumphing over survival, but it also represents the ultimate cost of humanity's hubris. 3 people died because someone convinced them that Venus would make a good vacation destination. Margaret Chen survived the evacuation but died 3 months later from complications related to acid poisoning. Her final words, recorded by the medical staff treating her, were simple and direct. "Venus doesn't want us there. We should have listened." As you finish reading the official report and look out at the familiar, welcoming sight of Earth hanging in Luna's sky, you find yourself thinking about the broader implications of what you experienced. Venus taught humanity that exploration and tourism are not the same thing. Exploration accepts risk in the service of knowledge and discovery. Tourism markets risk as entertainment and adventure. Venus demonstrated the catastrophic difference between those two approaches. The solar system contains many hostile environments that humans can visit with appropriate preparation and technology. Mars challenges visitors with cold and radiation. Europa tests human engineering with its subsurface ocean and radiation environment. Even the outer system worlds present difficulties that can be overcome with sufficient technology and careful planning. But Venus is different. Venus isn't just hostile. It's fundamentally, actively, creatively deadly in ways that make other challenging environments seem welcoming by comparison. Venus is a planet-sized demonstration of everything that can kill you, concentrated into an environment that works actively to dissolve, crush, burn, and poison anything that enters its domain. The lesson of Venus tourism isn't that space travel is dangerous. Humans have been managing dangerous space travel for over a century. The lesson is that some dangers are qualitatively different from others, and some environments are so hostile that avoiding them isn't cowardice, it's wisdom. Venus has spent billions of years perfecting its hostility. It has had time to develop atmospheric conditions that can dissolve the most advanced materials, weather patterns that can destroy cities, and chemical compositions that can kill living things in dozens of different ways simultaneously. Humans had a few years of engineering development and marketing enthusiasm. The outcome was never really in doubt. As you prepare to leave Luna for the journey back to Earth, you carry with you the knowledge that you've survived something that killed dozens of other people and destroyed an entire industry. You've experienced firsthand why some worlds should remain unexplored, why some adventures shouldn't be attempted, and why the universe contains places that are fundamentally incompatible with human life. Venus taught you that the most extreme experience possible is simply surviving contact with an environment that wants you dead with the patience and persistence of geological time. You paid for a 2-week vacation and received instead a lifetime reminder of humanity's place in a universe that contains worlds where the very air is poison and the weather is made of acid. It was, as advertised, the ultimate extreme experience, just not the kind anyone was expecting. And as you drift off to sleep on your journey home, you can still taste the metallic flavor of Venus's atmosphere in your mouth, and you know that some experiences leave marks that time will never heal. Venus doesn't want visitors, and after 10 days in its atmosphere, you finally understand why. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the nightmare of Venus tourism in 2070. If you enjoyed tonight's story, please like this video and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Sweet dreams, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful places in the universe are beautiful precisely because we can only appreciate them from a very, very safe distance. Until next time, keep looking up at the stars, but maybe think twice before booking passage to visit them. Good night.